I'm putting the talks on Facebook, on the Turner's page and the Whirling Dervishes of West London, and one or two other groups and pages, should you want to listen to them again at any time. And last week, just to recap, we were doing the teaching of 4 levels, which is basically from the Advaita tradition from India. And we saw how in most non-dual traditions, the one consciousness is often described as manifesting as a creation through a series of levels. And we saw how if you just want oneness, then just stick with oneness and ignore all this. But some people like more detail, and how much detail we go into really depends on what you want and on your questions and what you want to know. But a lot of what we're going to discuss tonight is particularly relevant to the training you're on and also the process that you're all going through. So with a lot of this, it explains the dynamics of what's actually going on and what's happening, and why with some of you certain things are coming up. So just to recap again, if you remember, there were 4 levels, and you had physical, which is flesh and bones, and the universe of 200 billion galaxies or more. And then that was contained within subtle, which is psychological. So you can use the word psyche if you want. And that was the world of our thoughts and feelings and desires and emotions. And for the most part, it's a secret, private world, because only we really know what's going on within our psyches. And then psyche was contained within what's called the causal world. And causal, if you remember, had 2 parts to it. And one part is like what you might describe as a blueprint. So it's like an enfolded film, or a bit like a coloured slide through which the light of consciousness shines. And then, depending on the colour here, that then manifests down through your psyche and the physical level. So it's like it's an enfolded blueprint of potential. And on the universal level, it's where the laws of nature are all enfolded, again in potential. And then the other part of the causal is like a deep, fathomless stillness. So it's like the great, vast emptiness of deep sleep at night, where there's no experience, there's no experiencer, there's no you or other, there's just blissful nothingness. And it's, as we mentioned, in a time of life trauma, there's nothing nicer than going into this place of deep sleep where there's no experience. And then behind that, or that is contained within the one undifferentiated consciousness, which is everything. So the whole, really that covers the whole of it. All of this is just a manifestation of the oneness. So all of us are the manifestation of the oneness, and all of us are the oneness, and the whole visible universe, subject to time and space, is all, again, the manifestation of oneness. So it's like in this image of Shiva dancing, Shiva Natyaraja it's called, Shiva, Lord of the Dance. And that again is a symbol of the one consciousness dancing the dance of manifestation. And in Indian philosophy it's sometimes referred to as Purusha and Prakriti. And Prakriti means manifest nature, and it's also sometimes called Shakti, and it's also sometimes called Maya. So it's like the power of manifestation. So Purush is a name given to the underlying stillness, and Prakriti is the nature or manifestation of the stillness. which is dancing in space and time. And the macabre is also exactly a symbol of that. The sheikh, who stands outside the circle on the red sheepskin, represents the unmanifest, unchanging consciousness, or Purusha, and all the dervishes dancing in time and turning represent the manifest universe dancing. So it's exactly, when we go into the ceremony, it's so much a metaphor for your lives as well, the way we emerge out of consciousness. And then we have this dance in time, which has a beginning and an end and a middle bit. So make it a good dance. And then the whole thing goes back into the great oneness again as the dance comes to an end. And so remember, Purusha and Prakriti, and in Western language that's sometimes called noumena and phenomena. So nomina, noumena, phenomena. So that again is unmanifest and manifest. And because in life we're dancing in the dance and we appear as separate, the great art to dancing in the dance is to know that underlying it is this great ocean of stillness. So your true nature, what is looking out through your eyes, is a great unfathomable ocean. And when life is very difficult or tumultuous or looks a bit frightening, it's wonderful to be able to rest back in the great unmanifest. And the writer Eckhart Tolle coined a phrase which he called portals into the unmanifest. So at certain times in your day and in your life, it's like there are these gateways back into the great stillness. So in the day you're dancing and you're caught up in your dance and you're playing your particular role in the movie, and sometimes it's blissful and sometimes it's terrifying, but all the while there's underpinning it, whether it's beauty or terror, is this great unfathomable ocean of stillness. And it's like there are these moments when you can access that, and they vary. It's even things like deep sleep is a portal into the unmanifest. The moment of dying is a portal into the unmanifest. Often when you're out in nature and you're confronted with intense beauty, it's suddenly it connects with something inside you, and it's like you say aha, and it's like you see the great stillness that lies behind everything. And sometimes when you're listening to an amazing piece of music, it will suddenly take you again right through into the great stillness which lies behind it. And if you practice methods like meditation or turning, they're also what appear as portals to the great stillness. And especially the macabre ceremony, which I can't quite explain it, but somehow Helen and I refer to it as a window into the other world. It's like, because of the power of the ritual, it's like it becomes a window and a portal into another world. And it's especially the case, I've mentioned before, when dervishes die, it's almost like they're present in the ceremony, and the ceremony becomes full of love. And often there's a centre line, which we'll explain to you a bit further on from the door, running over to the picture on the wall, and which the sheikh sits on that centre line. There it is there, thank you, Helen. And it's, again, that centre line for me is like, it's like another world almost. And sometimes I have a great sense of the turners who have died and the sheikhs who have gone before us. So it's almost like they walk that centre line. Again, I can't explain it, but I know it from experience. And sometimes before the ceremony, it's like what I can only describe as love seems to come down and descend on it. And then I think this macabre is going to be amazing. So those are all portals into the unmanifest. And with this process, it's like we mentioned there's a two-way flow, which is sometimes called wisdom and compassion, and sometimes called immanence and transcendence. And the process is that normally, initially it's a process, wisdom is a process of going inwards. So it's like you're disidentifying. So anything which you can observe is ultimately not who you are. So going back, you're saying, I'm not just the physical body, because I can observe it. I can look down at my hand, and it can even be removed if need be, and yet there's still something watching it. And then with the psyche, when you're thinking, when you're feeling, there's something behind thinking and feeling which is aware of thinking and feeling, and yet it's not thought or emotion. There's just something behind, and you can't look back at what's doing the looking. So again, you're disidentifying soul identity with both body and mind. And in Zen they call that mind-body dropped. So you drop your soul identity with mind and body. When your identity is solely in mind and body, then you're subject to the drama of life, and you're subject to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So when life's good, then you're very happy, and when life goes traumatic, then you're very unhappy. And life goes on like that, because that's the nature of manifestation. It's not going to be eternally blissful at that level, ever. You're going to go through, everyone goes through roughly a similar sort of process of ups and downs and traumas and bliss. But something behind that is total stillness and total awareness. So it's like, first of all, you draw back, and that's what's called wisdom, or it's called in the Indian tradition viveka. Buddhists call it prajna. So it's discriminative wisdom and disidentifying with this and this, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that. In Indian philosophy they use the term neti neti. So you're going back. And then you find that you're this presence which lies behind all thought and sensation. Step one. Step two, you then observe that everything which you had previously regarded as external is actually already taking place within this still presence that is yourself. And then it's exactly the same universe, but you notice that it's all taking place within you. So then what you're previously disidentified with is seen as all part of the manifestation of the oneness which you are. So it's like this amazing two-way flow. So that again in Buddhism, that's then the outflow, and that's the compassion, because compassion I think means with passion, with suffering. So everything is perceived as yourself. So that's total empathy. So it's like this amazing flow of the inward flow of wisdom and the outward flow of compassion. Now, what's relevant to dervishes? What's particularly relevant is this causal level. And if you remember last week I said there's something in here which is like a coloured film, and in Indian tradition, they refer to it as samskar or samskara. And as you go through life, you have these repetitive tendencies going on, and they build up and they build up, and you find ways, even when you're a little kid, you find ways of dealing with traumatic situations and dealing with unpleasant school teachers and other things like that. And you build up these repetitive patterns which eventually become part of your nature. And when it becomes part of your nature, it's mostly unconscious, so you're not aware of your behaviour at that level. And yet the light of consciousness shines through it, and it gets manifested often in repetitive situations in life. So often you'll find that you go around in a circle at this level, and you keep meeting up with the same situation in different guises. So that's the role the psychotherapist plays in life. Because if you're stuck at this level and you can't find happiness, then at a certain point you normally need help to find out what's driving you at a deeper level. If you're blissfully happy at this level, then it doesn't matter, you don't need therapy. Nothing. If it's not broken, it doesn't need fixing. If it goes on, something sabotages your happiness, then you need to look a bit deeper and find out what lies behind it. And the role of the therapist is to let you see it for yourself. And normally we're all mirrors for each other. Rumi says, the evil you see in others is your own character reflected. So when someone really annoys you, it's often good to see it might just be a mirror of yourself, something you're not seeing at that deeper level. And in the turning training, these deeper tendencies boil up to the surface. And it's like, as Helen said, your white robe that you're all wearing is known as a tenure, which is the same word as tandoori. So you're being cooked. And again, I don't fully understand the dynamics of it. But in a turning training, we've observed you can't hide anything. Things you've tried to push down, or acts you've put on here to impress or appear very sophisticated, in the process of the training they dissolve and they fall away. And it's like a sort of bubbling to the surface of things, and it can be trauma. It can be times earlier in your life when you've had great grief and you haven't been able to fully deal with it, so you've sort of pushed it down and got on with life as a means of dealing with it, and then it bubbles up again. So with your processes at the moment, and when I wander around, I'm sort of looking at you all, and it's like I see that thing bubbling up, and when it really bubbles up, it's like the story Helen read at the beginning from Rumi about the person vomiting a snake. And I've seen many snakes get vomited, and it's like something at this level, which is limiting your enjoyment of life, suddenly comes out, and you'll often get physical symptoms of feeling nauseous as well. And then when that process happens, I think I've mentioned it before, it's like there's a falling in love process. It's almost like there's nothing in the way, and this, which is also pure love, starts to shine through you as a transparent vehicle. But so in your processes, the actual training is incredibly tough, as you're discovering. We tell you at the interview stage, this is like basic SAS training, and you really do earn your dervish robe and your dervish hat. And all of you, again, we said, will at a certain point and several points, you'll hit a wall and you'll feel I'm just not going to get this, it's too difficult. And then the next lesson, something happens and there's movement. I saw it this lesson, several of you, something had completely budged and had changed. Other people I look at, I think there's still a little more to go there. So Helen moves in and helps you in a particular way which is right for you at this moment. And again, in different traditions, that thing there has different names. As I said, in Helen's craniosacral therapy, it's referred to as a fulcrum. So it's like there's something pivotal which is influencing your experience of in the subtle and physical. So that's sort of what the process is like. And with this model of 4 levels, I find it an incredibly useful model for looking at lots of different things in the world. And one of them, for instance, just an example, is romantic love. In just physical level, you're out walking along and you see someone who you think is stunningly beautiful, and that's like physical level attraction. It's what we find beautiful is entirely individual, which is very fortunate, or we all fall for the same person. But that's like the physical level. It's also like the biological urge to reproduce. And then if you start talking to the person, then you start to discover that you might have things in common, like a sense of humour or shared interests. And that's like attraction at the subtle level. And then beyond that, I think of the causal blueprint. And often in life, it's like you see someone and you know you're going to know that person. It's someone, almost like someone you've been waiting for. And at that level, it's because on your movie, you and the other person probably have a particular role to play together within the movie. And often I've fallen for people who definitely weren't on that level, and just down here, and then there's quite a lot of suffering, because it's like you're trying to make something happen which actually isn't there in the long run. So causal level for me is like the movie or the blueprint, where we have these different roles to play for each other. But then there's even another level of attraction, which is when you look into someone's eyes, or you look across the skin where you'll be bowing shortly, you see the same thing in the other person. So it's like when you bow across the skin, dervishes do, you're seeing the beloved in the other person. So what's looking out is seeing exactly the same thing looking back again. Because at that deeper level, you are all the beloved. So you're all one thing. So that's like using the 4 levels as a model of love and relationship. There are these different levels going up to the level where you already are the other person, and you see that manifested in each other's eyes. And I've always noticed whenever I look into any animal's eyes, it's like exactly the same thing I see bowing across the skin is looking back at me. Every animal seems to have that same look coming out of their eyes. So at that level, it's all total oneness. And then there are other ways you can look at it. Another way I find it really useful is as a model of both illness and healing. And again, physical level, Western science is very good at physical level, and it likes to chop things up. And from an illness point of view, illness is normally caused by viruses and bacteria and toxins and fungi. and other things at this level. And they can all be weighed and measured by science, and modern medicine's quite good at chopping them out and things like that. But often if you look deeper, just checking if I was alright. If you look deeper, there's emotions influence the physical body. So it's, again, repetitive situations, repetitive emotions, unresolved conflicts can affect illness at this level. So again, that's partly the role of therapy, is dealing with that. And then you go one step deeper, and again it's like the enfolded blueprint, where on your particular life movie, and there's an illness which starts here and ends there, or again there's deeply ingrained tendencies which sometimes manifest both as psychological states and then pathological states down here. And different systems of medicine often address different parts of that. As I said, Western medicine does a lot down here, but then you get other systems which go deeper and dissolve things at a deeper level. And the amazing thing is that however ill you are, this bit is never ill. So it's like when you're very ill, there's still that same thing behind it which is aware that you're ill but isn't itself ill. So it's like some medical systems are really involved in accessing the part of you which is beyond illness and resting in that. So gradually the light of that seeps down through those levels. So that's another way how you can look at this this four level model. And we're all entirely different, so what we find, what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another person. And even in healing, we each find our particular route, and we each find the method that suits us best. And also it's quite important to find out, if you are unwell, which level the particular symptom is manifesting from. For instance, if you twisted your ankle, you probably don't need deep psychotherapy. So it's a question of appropriateness to the level. And Miranda, I think you're a homeopath, and I think remedies probably don't just work here. I think they go much deeper. And then the effect sort of works its way down. And some other systems work at a much more at an energetic level, things like acupuncture, rather than just purely physical level. So that's 4 levels on illness and health. And the other thing I wanted to sort of go into in this process is the whole point of this model is that everything is part of one whole and is one consciousness. And that implies that everything is total precision. And normally down here, if you're just identifying with mind-body, life appears very frightening because it all appears random and chance and chaotic. But when you look at it from a deeper level, or if you look back at your life from a greater vantage point, it's like the whole thing is an immaculate jigsaw puzzle. And if you see that, then it enables you to what I would call surrender to it. It's almost like you can trust the process of life and you can surrender to it. And in the turning training and learning to be a dervish, a lot of it is all about your ability to let go and surrender. We get very habitually used to thinking we can manipulate and control things, and so often in the training you see people hang on quite doggedly, wanting to keep control. And part of the art of it is letting go, handing over, because you're doing this incredible balancing act where a lot of the time you're just sort of balancing on one leg and going round and round quite quickly. So it's all about trusting the process and letting go and giving over into the movement. And it's almost like then you realise you're being held and you're being carried and you're being turned. So at one level that's what the whole macabre and what you're learning is about. It's the ability to let go and surrender. And in this house, it's always had a strong, what I would call a bhakti aspect. Bhakti is like the yoga of love or the yoga of devotion. And there are a few academics here, but I'm definitely not one. And it's much more a sort of heart process. And turning is very much all about opening the heart. And the Mevlev has used the word the heart, but by that word the heart, it actually means your still centre. So when you're turning, say look into your heart, it's not really physically looking into your heart, it's like just being aware of the great stillness which lies behind everything. And when you're turning, it's so much to attend to, there isn't much time even to think of the great stillness. So you're attending to lifting up your leg and looking at your thumbnail. And while you're doing all that, it's like at a certain point something else takes over and you realise that you're being danced. And it's like the whole of life is that same dance. And there's a nice poem by Robert Bly, American poet, where he says, "We did not come to remain whole. We came to lose our leaves like the trees that are broken, and start again, drawing up from the great roots." So it's like you set off in life and you're all sort of full of your own abilities and what you're going to do, and you've got all these plans. And then often at a certain point, life doesn't go the way you think it should go. And the first stage is often all about climbing. So you sort of think you're climbing up this metaphorical ladder, and you might think you're climbing up a physical career ladder, and you also might be doing lots and lots of practice, and you think you're climbing up a spiritual ladder. And then there often comes a point when all of that, it's like the whole thing falls away and you lose it all. So you think, what on earth's happened to me? I thought I was so spiritual and now I don't know anything at all. And then out of that, I think it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. There's a new understanding arises out of that, and it almost comes out of sinking rather than climbing. And after that, it's almost like there's no difference between a spiritual path and a worldly path. Everything is seen as the same thing. And then it's like you're just dancing your dance. So you're no longer trying to get anywhere, you're no longer trying to achieve a special state. You realise that this is it, the dance is it, there's nowhere else to get to. And that again is reflected in the whole dervish ceremony, where at the end you'll notice that the dervishes no longer move around the room, they all turn in one place. So it's like they realise that there is nowhere they have to go to find it. And that's really what the macabre is a symbol of. Anything to add? Any questions?
What's the purpose of dance?
What's
the purpose of dance?
What's the purpose of dance? The dance, in my understanding, is for the sake of the dance. So, when you dance because it's such fun to dance. You don't, in my experience, dance because you're going to get a prize at the end of it. You dance for the dance. So, with a life dance, it's like we're the one mind dancing for the joy of dancing. Sometimes that dance might be terrifying, sometimes it's blissful, but it's still, the dance is just for the dance, in my understanding. But don't believe what I say.
What's macabre mean?
Macabre means coming face to face. So it's seeing the light of God in man. So it's that same thing of looking into the eyes, and what's looking out sees itself looking back. So there's no division. It's a nice word, macabre. But when we do the ceremony, that's almost the most important bit of the ceremony, is that bowing across the skin. And when you bow to someone, it's almost like a sort of this ripple sort of goes down through the line. I love bowing to George there.
I love bowing to you.
Yeah. So it's like you get this sort of something sparks across that skin, which ripples down. It's lovely. I haven't got my clock anymore, so I'm not sure what the time is. I don't want to keep you.
Sorry, once again, what Eberlav means?
What?
Eberlav, you say?
Oh, Eberlav. I think it's Turkish for enough, isn't it? By the grace.
The permission of God. No. It's in Mr. Razui's notes. I always find that I end up reading quite a lot of Mr. Razui's notes whilst I'm teaching, and it's a bit like what Philip says here. When you're turning in a macabre lane, for me, Mr. Razui actually comes in quite a lot. And when I'm in a teaching mode, I kind of feel like he's somewhere here. So I read quite a lot of his notes whilst teaching. And there is a file over here, I think Murat's found it, with Mr. Razui's talks from when he was teaching here in the house.
Valeria and I were mentioning how palpable Willem's presence was in the top studio that Tuesday immediately after, when we were practicing, and to us it felt like a complete mukabala, and we could feel his presence there. We definitely did.
Willem, for those of you who don't know, was the sheikh before me, and he died about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and we're having his memorial ceremony for the Shebi Aris ceremony, which is the Rumi one, on the 16th of December.
He's definitely going to come to that one.
He'll definitely be there, no doubt about it.
That macabre will be just a few days short of 40 days since his death, so it's a significant timing as well.
Okay, I'm going to read you a bit from Joseph Campbell, where you bring them next week. Yeah. Oh no, you can bring them today if you want. Yeah. Max is going to bring you a party gift. Okay, this is a bit from Joseph Campbell, and it's something Schopenhauer said, and it's a description of how the sort of movie of life works, and how it's what I call like a cosmic jigsaw puzzle, where everything fits together, so you can trust it. And Schopenhauer, in his splendid essay called On an Apparent Intention in the Fate of the Individual, points out that when you reach an advanced age and look back over your lifetime, it can seem to have had a consistent order and plan, as though composed by some novelist. Events that when they occurred had seemed accidental and of little moment, turn out to have been indispensable factors in the composition of a consistent plot. So who composed that plot? Schopenhauer suggests that just as your dreams are composed by an aspect of yourself of which your consciousness is unaware, so too your whole life is composed by the will within you. And just as people whom you will have met apparently by mere chance became leading agents in the structure of your life, so too will you have served unknowingly as an agent giving meaning to the lives of others. The whole thing gears together like one big symphony, with everything unconsciously structuring everything else. And Schopenhauer concludes that it is as though our lives were the features of the one great dream of a single dreamer, in which all the dream characters dream too, so that everything links to everything else, moved by the one will to life, which is the universal will in nature. It's a magnificent idea, an idea that appears in India in the mythic image of the net of Indra, which is a net of gems, where at every crossing of one thread over another there is a gem reflecting all the other reflected gems. Everything arises in mutual relation to everything else, so you can't blame anybody for anything. It is even as though there were a single intention behind it all, which always makes some kind of sense, yet none of us knows what the sense might be, or has lived a life that he quite intended. I think that's probably quite a good note to finish on, actually. And Max is now going to give you all a present. If you want one, you can all have a copy of my being book, free as a present.
Thank you. Thank you.
New planners first. And then okay.